So what is up, guys? You got your boy Jets Stingren here today, and today we are back with some reverse 1999 content, and today we are back here today to do a showcase for the boy Jay. Jay finally released, and we are finally going to be showcasing him off, going to be using him in some content, and yeah, we're going to just kind of break down this kit, talk about what he's all about, and go from there. And I'll see you guys in just a moment. Alright, so this is going to be Jay. Jay is a sub DPS sustained character that operates with using counters and being able to inflict the burn stacks. He can also counter attack enemies with allies being shielded, which is something that he can do basically on a dime. He can put up some pretty fantastic numbers if you allow him to counter, because his counters are actually based on the number of times that allies are attacked and the fact that they are in shields. So he can really get some pretty crazy counters if all allies are attacked, which can be really good to further amplify his damage and to at least allow him to do some really respectable numbers in terms of content. So anyway, let's get right into it. Let's talk about his kit. Let's talk about what he does, break down his inheritances, skills, cube choice, portrays, and resonance, and let's get right into it. So his first inheritance is going to be of the following. When attacking, gain a percent or gain an attack percent equal to 0.5 times the number of burn stacks on self, and resolves on burn to do damage to self while retaining the same number of stacks. Every time Jay actively attacks successfully and inflicts burn, Jay will then grant himself the same number of burn stacks that he afflicted on enemy. So TLDR, if he gives one enemy one stack of burn, he then gives himself a stack of burn. We'll talk about that, why that's important, in just a moment. And he takes 50% less damage from resolving on burn stacks, and he will never fall below 50% of his max HP in this way. Okay, pretty good. Next, let's talk about his Insight 2. Insight 2 is just damage dealt up plus 8%. Nothing too crazy, pretty standard, fine. Insight 3. Jay's burn stack limit is increased to 35, and he becomes immune to freeze and cold while in the burn status. At the start of the round, if Jay is below 50% HP, dispels all non-burn statuses and negative statuses from self, and grants himself 20% critical rate to self for one round. Now let's talk about what the whole purpose is here. Now, Jay's whole thing is about stacking up burns on himself to provide a set amount of bonuses. This is inherent on one of his skills, and this is also inherent to his ultimate damage output and his counter. So there's a lot of reasons why he wants to have a high amount of stacks of burn. So of course, running him with other burn supports that can help accelerate burn can be a really good thing. Him being a really good partner for Isolde is a prime example, because Isolde giving you 3 stacks of burn immediately every single turn is going to be something that Jay can fully utilize to give faster stacks to get up to that 35 stack limit really quickly. And as I said before, Jay does have a supportive buff in his kit with his only attacking skill, which we'll talk about in just a second, that can of course really be accelerated due to this type of combination in the game. Now let's talk about his immunities. Now, him being immune to freeze and cold is an interesting choice. Now I do see why he is immune to both freeze and cold, because I mean, he's literally on fire. Like he's literally burning. So I mean, like, of course that makes the most sense where, you know, you want to be freezing cold. But in terms of content relevancy, this isn't really the most common thing you see. This is a very minor buff. I think the most common you would have seen this is like chapter 5 in the Gorgon core fight, which is in that same chapter, and it's also a mains bulletin fight that tends to come back, which, you know, that does open up use for him there to be a potential sustained unit there. But I mean, you don't necessarily need to use him there either. I think he actually has disadvantage there as well, as far as I remember. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing, but it's not directly necessary. But one of the biggest things is his own ability to remove negative statuses and negative stats to himself whenever he's below 50%. Now, since he is a character that does operate in the same vein as Semmelweis, who wants to be at low HP to achieve better damage output, this is really good, because this kind of helps him in the sense where you don't need to run him with a cleanser, and there's a fair amount of them in the game now, but the best ones also heal, which is something that Jay doesn't want. You don't really want to run Jay with a healer, which is a little weird, I know, but it's the same concept with Semmel, where you ideally try to limit the amount of times he can heal himself by HP method, because you want him to deal as much damage as you possibly can while he's also sustaining the team. If you really didn't care for the fact of him being a sub DPS, then yeah, you can run him with a healer, because at that point you're not really caring about his damage, you're more so caring about if he can sustain the team or not. Which, to be completely honest, with his shields, he can sustain pretty well, but it's not the greatest form of sustain. Obviously, our greatest form is Kakania, because she's just unrivaled in her ability, but there is going to be something I'm going to talk about later that can actually help this out. But in general sense, his inheritances are actually pretty fine. The higher upper stack limit of burn just basically means he gets more damage potential and a stronger buff off his skill, which we'll talk about. The immunity to freezing cold is just, it's nice. It's more so niche more than anything. There's only a few instances where this really comes up, so fair. That's really just it though. I mean, the self removal of status is also really good though. I do like the fact that he at least can cleanse himself of negative statuses and negative things. So that's really good, because he can really put himself where he is at low HP, but if a boss or something or enemy stacks up a bunch of poison or something on him, then it becomes actively a problem for him, and it becomes hard for him to survive, because you're going to try to maintain him being at low HP while also providing the same gimmick. So that's a really, really good thing there. But yeah, so let's talk about his skills, and let's talk about his skills first. First skill is going to be hardness testing, which is, common blacksmith thing. It's a one target attack that deals up to 450% reality damage and inflicts 2 stacks of burn on a target hit. For every stack of burn on self, grants all allies damage dealt plus 1% for 2 rounds. Now this is what I was talking about before with Jay having a supportive buff in his kit. So basically, if he has the max stack of burns on self, which is 35, which we explained earlier from his inheritances, he can effectively give you 35% damage dealt up, which isn't bad. That's actually slightly higher than some other units, being 30% at max. I believe Ana Lee is 30%. So that is, something. 35% is at least a little bit better than 30. It's not the greatest boost at all, but it's effectively, since he is a sustain and a sub DPS, he's at least providing something for the team. So I really can't actively say nothing negative about it. It's actually pretty fine. And then let's get into the juicy part, which is his counter, which is the main thing that you really want to be using with Jay, because you want him to be counterattacking non-stop. He has a mass counter effect that generates all allies a shield up to 250% of his max HP. 250% of its attack as HP for 2 rounds. And with each stack of burn on self generating an additional 3% shield factor, and after an ally holding a shield is attacked, J riposte with tempering, which is the counter attack. So the counter attack does 30% reality damage to all enemies, inflicts 2 stacks of burn on the target's hit, and for every 10% of missing HP, it deals itself additional 10% reality damage. That is what I was explaining before, where he wants to be at low HP, and of course he's going to be able to do this by self burn or other further outside support, such as Semmelbias, who can give him the new blood buff, which of course can have him drop 5% HP, and of course her own ultimate, which hits 20% of your own HP as well. So there is some ways to really help his HP drop. So that's actually a thing. But long story short, you want to be using this skill every single turn. You don't necessarily have to use every single turn, but you do want to have this up as much as you can, because you, of course, want to put yourself in a good situation where he's always countering. So always just put up a shield. Always do this before applying his normal attack skill. I would just say do this for the most part. Just counter, counter, counter. And of course, whenever you find free time, like if you have healthy enough shields, you can go for the other skill if you really want to put that damage up effect on your team. And yeah, you go from there. Anyway, let's talk about his ultimate. His ultimate is a mass attack that deals 250% reality damage to all enemies. Right before attacking, inflict burn on the target equal to the number of burn stacks on self. Now, since the obvious cap is 30, it will only put up 30 stacks of burn. It won't put 35. So if he's at max stack of 35, he won't be able to put 35 on them, but he will put 30 on them, which is something that's there, because the normal cap for burn is 30. Jay does not gain burn stacks from this attack. And for every excess burn stack on the main target, this attack deals 10% reality damage. Now, with a properly built burnt team, you can really stack this up to a high amount, because with proper burn teams, being like Isolde or Spoth or Ulu, these units that can help accelerate burn, you can really quickly get this higher multiplier really going, because you're putting yourself in a situation where you continuously get more and more stacks just actively. Spoth, of course, can give you the biggest amount because she can self buff, then put up a bunch, and then of course she's also being empowered by Isolde's passive effect, which gives her an additional 3. So you can go anywhere, I think like 7 to 10 stacks in a single turn off just a combination of Spoth, one attack, and then Isolde, which is pretty good. So that's a really, really good way to kind of accelerate damage to this ultimate if you are looking to run them as teammates together, which I did talk about in his team build video, where you can run them as a team together with allowing Spoth to be the DPS, Isolde to be the burn support, while also further amplifying damage. So yeah, and the cool thing about this is that Joe doesn't directly step on Isolde's buffing ability, because Isolde is buffing up 75% damage dealt up total. So she's buffing up 50% from Rosin Round, which is a unique buff. And then the power burst that she gives from Finale is also a unique buff. So the 35% damage dealt up he could potentially give to a team does not imply to that as well. It's stackable, which is really, really nice. So let's talk about his cube preference. His cube preference, of course, is his own cube. I mean, we already know this, right? His own cube is his best in slot. You can also use things on Knock on the Door for critical rate, which can kind of help his damage potential a little bit. So you can actually do that. Yes, you can see he does get damage dealt plus 6% when the target is burning, which is something that he effectively does. And whenever he does an extra action as a mass attack, he gets 28% incantation might. I mean, his counter, his riposte, actively acts as an extra action, so you do get this 28% extra modifier, which is not bad at all. You can technically even use same old story for the incantation might bonus and the 5% penetration. Since he doesn't have an active channel on self, he doesn't get that bonus bottom effect, but the 5% penetration and the 18% incantation is still something that he can use. It's still feasible. It still works. I do like Knock on the Door because of its really high HP value, 2400, which is actually pretty nice. Of course, his does give 2200, but 24 is, good for sustained reasons. So I do like Knock on the Door more than his own cube, to be honest. But of course, best in slot will always be his own personal cube, because it's made for him to basically do everything that he needs to do. And let's talk about his Portrays. So Portrays for Jay, let's talk about it. So P1 gives Heat Treating Temporary, now deals 40% reality damage, and for every 10% you now do additional 15% reality damage. Okay, good. P2 is Bodily Furnace, now gains an attack based off of 1% or 1 times the number of burn to self. So basically, TLDR, if he has 25 stacks of burn, this is effectively a 25% attack bonus, which is fine. P3 is the burn limit is increased to 45 stacks, so going at effective plus 10 from his Insight 3. Okay, good. Which of course that means his potential damage dealt up bonus now jumps up to 45, which is kind of strong. That's kind of strong. Can't knock it. All right, and for P4 is going to be for his ultimate. It gives 450% from 350, which is nice. And for every excess stack of burn, it now deals an additional 15%. As I said before, on specific teams, so you can actually deal some pretty feasible damage. So pretty good. And P5 now gains an attack percent equal to 1.5 times the number of burn stacks on self, which ultimately means, again, more damage output for Jay. Now, if you're really looking for a direct number, if you were to consider going for dupes for Jay, go no more than P1. I think P1 is absolutely fine. You could technically push the margin by going P2, but P1 is basically what you'd want, because it makes his riposte counter very good. It makes it just deal, of course, more damage, and again, with him having that lower HP, is going to have a higher multiplier and a higher modifier boost. So again, I think that could be something that you can do if you really, really are insistent on duplicates for Jay, which I don't necessarily think you should do. If you're asking me personally, I think he's personally fine at P0. But if you are really wanting to push a margin because he's a favorite character, or you want to further invest because you have the means to do so, then go no more than P1. I think that's ultimately where you should stop at. And let's talk about his resonance. So this is the standard build you're gonna run with him. It's a mix of crit and attack. So this is basically what the build is about. If you want to choose the proper resonance pattern, you can go Genuity. For all these different bonuses, it gives you crit rate, damage bonus, and incantation might. This is really recommended because it gives you extra damage on his temperament, and it also gives you a little bit extra damage bonus as well, which stacks on top of his cube. So it gives him a little bit of extra power to mess around with, which is also pretty good. Critical damage is always a well appreciated stat for any character in the game, even if they're not necessarily building to crit rate. So still works. But if you wanted to go a more sustained route, you can actually go equal balance, if I'm saying that correctly. This one gives him a lot more bulk, and it also gives him damage taken reduction. It still gives him damage bonus and critical damage, so at least he still has some power backing up his kit. But the damage taken reduction and the extra bulk is actually very good if you wanted him to be more of a sustain. Now, this is really good because this allows him to survive a little bit longer while not having as much damage. If you go the Genuity route, this is basically just for him to deal more damage, and that's it. It effectively takes a little bit away from his bulk, because if you look at his base stuff here, you can see that he has a higher HP and he has a damage taken reduction built into the kit. But if you go the Genuity route, you see he loses a bit of HP and he loses that damage taken reduction effect as well. So if you wanted to go more damage, then yeah, sure, go Genuity. But if you didn't really want to touch it at all, you can technically leave it at his default stat, which is all of this. He gets critical resist rate, he gets damage taken reduction, a small bit of damage bonus, which is still helpful, but he does get a fair amount of HP, a little bit more bulk. But if you wanted to kind of have a best of everything while also still improving on the sustainability, then you can go equal balance, which is going to be what you can do. But this is the ultimate build that you want. And yeah, and just to look at, these are his stats from below. As you can see, he has pretty decent stats overall. About close to 170% critical damage. He has about 40% crit rate, which is, you know, decent. Pretty decent amount of attack, HP, good amount of bulk. Yes, 31% damage bonus. This is coming from his cube and the resonance pattern and the pieces as well. A bit of damage taken reduction and a bit of incantation might. So, but yeah, that is Jay. Now, I wanted to take this time to kind of explain this in this video, but if you should pull for Jay. Now, I usually say this at the end of the video, but Jay is an interesting case. Well, I do think that Jay is a really good sustain. I shouldn't say really good. He's a good sustain. He's a good sustain. I'm not going to knock that. But he's not the most usable unit, I'd say. And the real reason why is because you don't really ever need sustains outside of Kakania. Kakania is the sustain that you want and will always be usable in any form of content. But that is not to say that Jay does not have his own team placements, his own synergy options, and his own abilities to be ran, and not to even say that you can run Kakania and Jay together in the same team. In fact, it's actively encouraged for you to run Jay and Kakania together, because this allows for Jay to actually survive a little bit better. But do you need two active sustains on the same team? Not necessarily. But if you really wanted to capitalize on Jay's performance and keep him at low HP with a reasonably safer approach, then yes, you can run Kakania with him, which is again something that I am going to be showing off in this video too. Now, the best thing about Jay though is that he actively does get better in the future by not his own way, but because of Euphoria. If you guys don't know, 2.3 introduces the first real patch of characters, which actually is going to be one buff there for Miss New Babel. And Miss New Babel actually allows for Jay comps to go absolutely bananas. So what happens here with Jay's Euphoria buff, Babel's Euphoria buff, is that she can cast a new wave, which is her shield buff, whenever an ally is attacked for once per round, or if there is a total of 3 riposte that's used up to 2 times in a round outside of her freely being able to cast it on her own. And she also gets a bonus effect where she can overfill the shield amount. Normally, whenever you use a shield and there's still when there's a partial amount left, it doesn't necessarily give you the full amount of the shield from Heat Temporary or any other character that can do shields, right? Well, the best thing about this with Miss New Babel is that she can actually go over this shield amount for as much HP as she needs to. There's no direct limit, which is actually insane. So let's say you have Jay on like 10% of HP and he puts up a nice 2-star shield. Babel could come right behind him to do a new wave to make that shield even stronger, and whenever the enemy starts attacking you, she can then cast another cast of a new wave. And then if he riposte 3 times, which is super easy to do because again, you're using a 4-man team and he counters every based on if an ally is shield. I don't know why I just started like crazy there. Then that's gonna quickly build up that 3 stack amount to then allow her to cast a new wave again to further increase the shield. So basically what ends up happening here is that Jay and Babel kind of create this impregnable wall where you kind of remove a lot of Jay's core issues, which is you can play him at low HP without Kakania because the enemies are not breaking through your shield. No matter how strong they are, they don't actively break through the shield because of just how much you're continuously getting back. So you don't really need her anymore. You pretty much put yourself in a situation of where you just don't die, which is pretty insane. So yeah, that's a really cool thing there. You can technically even run Kakani in that type of comp. You can. And it's just gonna make it even harder for you to die. Like, I mean, it's basically 0% death rate, which is really cool. But overall, it's a really good core that can be shoehorned into a lot of teams because it does take up 2 slots. You can just run like the main DPS and the support for them, and then you can run them 2 as a sustain without really needing a healer or anything of that sort. So it's a really good comp. I do think that Jay does thrive a little bit better in the future. So I do think that if you are looking to at least pull Jay, you can at least actively say with a good conscious mind that he does get better in the future. But that's all I really wanted to say. We're going to get into some gameplay and I'll see you guys in just a moment. Peace. Alright, so this is going to be the team we're going to be using him with today, which is going to be him, Semo, Isolde, and Kakani. Of course, we talked about the synergy between him and Isolde earlier. Semo, of course, is going to help with getting our HP reduced. And, of course, we have Kakani for the overall survivability. So let's get right into it. So first things first, we are definitely looking to do this, and sure. We could have debuff first, but it doesn't really matter because we're kind of just setting up our buffs this turn.
My forge, my rules.
So long as we have a good amount of stuff here, good amount of attacks, we should be fine. As you can see, Isolde ended up getting into her interlude basically turn 1, which is kind of insane. Because it's just all that burn we were putting up from Jay. Let's just and let's just scrap more burn this way. I think next turn we'll go for Jay's attack, so we can get some damage dealt the bonus too. Okay, gonna drop everyone's HP a little bit. A lot of 2-star cards there. We're gonna reroll this though. Okay, nice. We got debuff, damage dealt up. Let's new. Actually, no. New blood first. Damage dealt? No. New blood first. This, and I could go for another Semmel just to kind of accelerate into our ult for next turn. Let's see. We'll shield up. We'll do this. We will do this for Isolde ult and sure.
I'm an artist of steel. Melt it down, forge it up.
$29K, not bad.
Very well.
If I had bow turn crit, this probably would have went a lot better.
I have prepared it all. I have prepared it all. Oh, rotten luck. Not lightning and up my head.
And there we go. And there's the counter to finish it off. And that is going to be that. So that is going to be using Jay in the team. And that's basically how it goes. You just counter up a bunch of times. You fire off some strong damage output. And then you just kind of just win. But anyway, that is pretty much it. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.